The truth is out there.
It is one of the world's greatest mysteries, Scotland's legendary Loch Ness Monster. So does the lake creature actually exist? Well, if you ask one man, he'll tell you it is in fact no myth.
Every day it's flaunted in front of your face.
Hundreds of people in the valley say they are hearing voices in their heads.
You just choose to ignore it.
Belief can be a powerful force. No one knows that better than the people who are sure they've seen Bigfoot.
Real accounts.
He says he knows who's playing mind games.
Rogue government officials that are sponsoring this, also corrupt business officials, and private citizens.
From real people.
Hundreds of people turned out tonight for the unveiling of a very controversial statue.
Yeah, it really is. The Satanic Temple of Detroit revealed the one-ton bronze statue.
It's time for you to take a swim.
I'm just excited to see my Lord and Savior Baphomet represented in such glorious Italian stone. I do hope his eyes gaze upon me, and that my allegiance is recognized.
In the dark waters.
The Dark Waters channel is for entertainment purposes only. Although information in these stories can be traced back to relevant and true sources, Dark Waters strongly discourages its viewers, listeners, and subscribers from visiting the site of incidents and encounters discussed or revealed on the show. In other words, we will not be held responsible if you are attacked by a dogman, molested by a Bigfoot, bitten by vampires, chased by chupacabras, abducted by aliens, accosted by the Men in Black, investigated or arrested by the local law enforcement, CIA, FBI, NSA, EPA, BLM, or another alphabet group, whether on U.S. soil or abroad. Thank you for tuning in, and enjoy the show.
My family lives in the backwoods of Oregon. We've been there for over 6 generations. Over that time period, some of my family members have gone on to be outstanding citizens. We even had a congressman in our family in 1990. But this story is not about the good side of our family. It's about the black sheeps in our family. Willis, my dad's older brother, was always in and out of jail. As a kid, I remember he would stop by the house and my mom would put away the silverware. My Uncle Will had earned this nickname, Backwoods Will. You see, he stayed in trouble with the police. So in order to elude them, he spent 90% of his time in the woods. Uncle Will lived off the land and profited from it as well. It seemed as if this dark cloud of legal troubles always followed my Uncle Will everywhere he went. Then one day, he shows up to our house with this brand new King Ratch Ford F-150. And I'm talking about immediately an argument ensues between him and my dad. Dad finds out that his brother is growing pot deep in the woods. I didn't really want to disclose that information, but it's important to the story. So let me move on. Now my dad tells Uncle Will, stay the hell away from us. He doesn't want the feds coming over here looking for him and putting our lives in danger. Well, a couple of weeks pass. It's a Saturday morning, about 11:30, and the phone rings. I can overhear this conversation. And it's my uncle. I hear him screaming through the phone, telling my dad to come get him. At this time, I'm 17 years old. So my dad grabs a shotgun and tells me to get in the truck with him. It felt like we were driving forever. We took this back road, then turned off into the woods, then down the hill and up a hill, and then down this thin trail. And after about 10 minutes on this trail, it opened up to this clearing in the woods. And as far as your eyes could see, it was nothing but marijuana. So Dad and I stopped, hopped out of the truck. And just as we got out, the wind shifted, and we were bombarded with smoke. So much that I began to choke and barely could breathe. Then a few minutes later, the wind shifted again and a thick smoke moved away. Now, I've never experienced using any drugs before in my life. So this is where I'll readily admit I was high. But the events that happened next are true to my recollection. We begin to hear gunshots coming from about 100 to 200 yards away, right along the tree lines on the outskirts of the field. So my father and I took off running in that direction. When we arrived, my uncle was there leaning against a tree. He was sweating and breathing hard. When Dad asked him what was wrong, he said, "These damn Bigfoots is high." And just as he said that, one of them stepped out from behind a tree. This thing was 8 feet tall, with all black hair. Its eyes, nose, and mouth were wide open, and it was drooling. And as high as I was from all that smoke that I inhaled, I know what I saw. It just stood there looking at us for about 45 seconds. It turned, taking 2 steps, and began to run away. Craziest thing was, this Bigfoot had to be high because it ran straight into a tree, face first. Then in a fit of rage, it swung its arm and knocked the tree over. This creature repeated the same thing 3 times before I guess it got frustrated, and it just ran away, knocking over every tree in its path. We got my uncle back to the truck, and that's when he explained that these creatures had been in the area for the past 2 years, and he had never had a problem with them. But when he accidentally started a fire and the plants began to burn, they lost it. He said several of them came in on him at one time, surrounding him. He didn't want to shoot him, so he shot in the air. That's when one of them chased him. A year later, word started to spread about my uncle and his pot farm. He got busted by the feds, sent to federal prison. But I'll tell you one thing. I'll never forget that day. It was my first time getting high, and I actually saw Bigfoot. Being outdoors has been a passion of mine for many years. It's my escape. Most people turn to drugs or alcohol to relieve them from the problems of life. Me, I just head out into the woods. For over a year now, I've been saving money for a 3-day hiking trip in Washington State. I'm headed to the Cascades to experience what many of my friends call the best scenery in the world. My partner Sam and I were so excited to get away from the daily chores and have some free time away from the pressures of work that we found it hard to contain ourselves. We arrived at the airport in Seattle, grabbed a rental car, and headed straight to our cabins. This place was nice and was nestled right along Big Creek. Sam and I got settled in, had a few cigars, in anticipation of leaving out at sunrise to go for a hike through the woods. Our plan was just to follow Big Creek as far as we could and have some fun outdoors. So the following morning we had breakfast and headed out. About 11:30, we stopped for lunch and sat down to take a quick break. That's when Samuel decided we should try and venture off the walking trail. Now I must admit, I didn't verbally contest this idea at all. But in my mind, I was thinking, if we're going to venture off trail, we should have done it about 8, 9 o'clock in the morning, giving us enough daylight just in case we got lost. But I didn't say anything, and we moved northward off the trail. Sam is a retired Marine and well-trained in the outdoors. Besides, he's my life partner and I trust him. We have ventured out this way many a times and had absolutely no problems. So I was confident that we would make it back just fine. However, what we were about to walk into was something that neither Sam and I had ever encountered. You see, we had been walking up this steep slope for about 15 minutes. Then we reached the top of this hill. From that vantage point, you were able to overlook this very small valley with a creek below. Sam, being a little bit faster than I, he reached the peak a few minutes before me, and he was looking down at some tracks on the ground when I arrived. That's when he turned to me and said, "We probably need to start heading back. Listen, I'm a great hiker, and I'm good at moving through the woods, but tracking is not my strong suit." So when Sam pointed to the ground and told me that these were fresh grizzly prints, this fear began to wash over me. Now, of course, we had bear spray, but we had no weapon. It's not like you can hop on a plane with a rifle and tell the TSA, "No worries, this rifle is only for safety purposes." So as we stood there, Sam's attention turned to the valley below. He started to shade his eyes from the sun and said, "Holy fuck, we gotta go right now." I kid you not. Below and across the creek from us was a freaking grizzly bear. Distance, I'd say 500 yards away, and that's not very far considering the fact that they run more than 20 miles an hour. The good thing was that it didn't see us, and we were upwind from it. So we thought, how many times will you ever get a chance to see a grizzly bear in the wild? And we stood there and observed it for a few minutes. We had been watching it for no more than 3 minutes when this bear started acting strange. It turned and faced the wood lines, then started backing up, crossing the creek. And then it stopped It was completely weird. This bear had placed itself in the middle of a flowing creek of water, and it just stood there. And it looked confused, sniffing the air and looking left to right. That's when we heard this knocking sound from below us in the woodline. It got louder and louder. It felt like something was happening. At the time, I had absolutely no clue what it was, but we were both about to learn that the world is not what it seems. The grizzly started reacting to the knocking sound that was coming from below us, turning and facing our direction, and he began to back up, crossing the creek to the other side from which he came. For the next 30 minutes, we stood there as this bear moved back and forth across the creek, and every time it got to one side or the other, this knocking sound would start. Then finally, in what seemed like an act of desperation, this grizzly bear took off running down the creek on an angle, heading towards the woodlines away from us. And what happened next? Had Sam not been with me, I wouldn't even believe my own two eyes. As this bear is full speed running into the tree line, something huge, I mean huge, with the broadest shoulders I've ever seen, rams into this bear full speed. It was like a fucking car crash had just happened. It's hard to explain because it happened so fast. I mean in seconds. This creature tackles this 500-pound bear while it's moving full speed, sending it rolling to the ground. Imagine Ray Lewis hitting Tom Brady as he's trying to scramble down the sideline. That's the best way to describe it. This thing didn't even lose balance. The bear rolled every bit of 30 feet, and before it could stand up, this creature grabbed it by the snout and quickly twisted and snapped its neck. I couldn't help it. I was shocked at what I saw, and I reacted to the whole scene by screaming, "Oh shit!" And that's when the creature turned his head and looked in our direction. Now I can tell you what happened next. We ran. And I don't mean ran for 5 minutes. We ran through the woods for the next 35 minutes, covering what had to be at least 2.5 miles. When we hit the trail, we jogged back to the cabin, packed our stuff, and drove until we were in Redmond, east of Seattle. Sam and I didn't discuss what we saw until later that night in bed. He stayed up on his laptop, and by morning, he had an explanation. He told me what we witnessed was a grizzly bear being hunted by Sasquatches, and that the knocking sound we were hearing meant that there were others just like that one close to us, maybe within 200 yards. Needless to say, we haven't been back to that area. And since that day, Sam and I have gotten married, and he's now a Bigfoot enthusiast. I support his quest, but I'm not going out there looking for what I saw. There's no logical reason to confront a creature that strong, agile, and that's clearly intelligent.